everybody, welcome to the channel.
Hey guys, we're your hosts, Em and Jay.
And today we're talking about episode 12 of Netflix's She-Ra.
This is the episode before the season finale, and a lot of it ended up being a big exposition dump, which didn't make for the best viewing experience. A lot of this exposition could have been spread out throughout the season, and it could have been leading up to actually meeting Light Hope for the first time. But instead, it all ended up being dumped into this one episode.
The episode begins where we left Adora falling into a pit after Catra left her hanging. As she's falling, images of her own memories along with Light Hope are being projected around her.
Adora opens her eyes and she finds herself in a chamber with Light Hope. This interpretation of Light Hope is pretty different from the original, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just different. In the original, Light Hope didn't really have a form, it was more like literal light. Light Hope also had a pretty distinctly masculine voice. In this version, they refer to Light Hope as a woman, and they use female pronouns for her, so we're just gonna go with that for this version. But this Light Hope is a lot more technological than the original. The original was more magical. Here she's very robotic and her voice sounds robotic.
And she projects a hologram in order to communicate with Adora.
Adora introduces herself and Light Hope says that she's known about Adora since she was an infant and she wasn't able to protect her from the Horde, so she's been watching her grow up from afar. Adora says that's kind of creepy, but honestly, Adora, I don't know if you have any room to talk. You slept in Glimmer's bed without her permission. This leads to another comedy bit where Light Hope is trying to make Adora feel more comfortable by choosing a different form, because she's worried that the form she's in is too creepy, but it just gets more creepy, and it makes Adora more uncomfortable. Light Hope, I'm sure Adora would be the most comfortable with the form that you've been using to communicate with her. Back in Bright Moon, Glimmer is getting impatient waiting for Adora to get back. The animation in this scene is particularly bad. Glimmer is very off-model. She's shorter than she's usually portrayed.
The perspective is also way off too. Everything just looks really flat and kind of smushed together.
Somehow the staircase is back, but it's silver this time instead of gold. And we'll get to Swiftwind in a minute.
There's a knock at the door, and the guard tells Glimmer that something is here to see her. And it turns out to be Swiftwind, the horse that Adora transformed back in episode 3. The two are shocked to see him, both because of his appearance and because of the fact that he can talk. Although back in episode 4, they didn't seem shocked when Adora transformed that lizard. Bo even asked if that's what happened to their horse. And then in episode 8, Perfuma told them about a mysterious winged horse that ate all the apples in Plumeria, and they commented again that it might have been Swiftwind. So they've made multiple references to Swiftwind in the past, they just didn't know he could talk. But the scene goes on as if all of this is new to them. So it comes off more that this is just another comedy bit and not really that they're learning anything new.
Swiftwind's animation isn't handled very well, especially his face. His speaking animations are very awkward, and his proportions are really off. After they freak out, Swiftwind explains that he has a connection to Adora and he feels like she's in trouble. He's asking for their help to find her since they're a part of her herd. They both agree, but Bo says that Glimmer's still glitching and her mother might not want her to go out right now, especially after what happened the last time they went out. Glimmer says it's fine, they'll just sneak out, and her mom doesn't have to know.
After episode 10, it seemed like Glimmer and her mother were making progress and learning to understand each other better, but now Glimmer's regressed back to her old ways, even after her mother said that she didn't want her to give up on the rebellion.
She hasn't really had any character development. Angela thought that she lost her daughter, and she was willing to trade herself to get her back.
After how traumatic it was for her to lose her husband, and then facing that trauma again with Glimmer, and then when she did get her back, Glimmer was very cold to her and constantly pushed her away. And after all of that, Glimmer is still going behind Angela's back.
Can you imagine if they do sneak out and Angela finds out that they're missing again? What that would do to her? I'm worried this also sends a bad message to kids,
considering the target audience for the show. Glimmer was injured, and she doesn't tell her mother about it until it's forced out of her.
That is not something that kids should hide from their parents, ever. Even if they're worried about getting in trouble or they're embarrassed embarrassed.
Plus, she's constantly going behind her back and talking back to her.
Anytime Glimmer wants to do something, her first thought is, let's just sneak out and do whatever we want. Either her mom will never find out, or if she does find out, they'll deal with it later. I'm just worried this is a bad message to send to kids, and it might lead to some pretty harmful things.
Luckily, Queen Angela happens to come to the door at that moment because she was curious about the horse being escorted to Glimmer's room. She then gives Glimmer permission to go after Adora, despite the fact that she's still glitching, which proves development on Angela's part, because she even refers to Glimmer as Commander, and calls back to their conversation the night before about how she doesn't want her to give up on the rebellion. Queen Angela's main characterization is her being an overprotective mother who is constantly smothering her daughter with affection, and basically implying that she needs to let go and let her daughter make her own decisions. And we're actually seeing that from her, but we're still seeing very bratty and immature behavior from Glimmer, and that's just disappointing. The scene then cuts to the Fright Zone, where Entrapta is enthusiastically showing off her experiments to Catra and Scorpia. She's been studying the data crystal that Catra brought her, and is able to make progress on her experiments, and also her theories about the first ones. Catra asks her to cut to the chase, and if they can use this technology to upgrade their weapons, but Entrapta insists that this goes far beyond weapons.
I know Entrapta is very passionate about her projects and her experiments, but what's going to happen to Drill? They never bring it up. I know that she's mad at the other princesses because she thinks that they left her behind, but that had nothing to do with her people. Is she just gonna forget about them? Is Drill under Horde control now? I'm pretty sure the whole world thinks she's dead, so that probably includes Drill. Not that we've gotten the chance to see Drill and what's going on there. She wasn't a very hands-on leader anyway, so I guess they just moved on.
But it's still something that should probably be addressed. Back in the ruins, Lighthope explains that she was created by the first ones, who were explorers from a distant planet. She also reveals that this place is the Crystal Castle, which as fans of the original, this place is a bit underwhelming.
Lighthope explains that She-Ra was appointed by the first ones to be Etheria's champion. There's actually been a long line of She-Ras, so Adora isn't the first, but that line was broken, and she's the first She-Ra in 1,000 years. The scene starts to cut between Adora and Lighthope, and Entrapta, Catra and Scorpia. So we're getting information from these two sides at the same time. Entrapta explains that First One's tech actually runs through the entire planet, basically making the entire planet First One's tech. Lighthope explains that everything in Etheria is connected, and the princesses are given power over the elements through the runestones. It's She-Ra's responsibility to bring all the princesses together to keep balance in Etheria. Entrapta explains that all of the runestones are connected, which means that they're the best access point to hack the entire planet. If they could manage to hack a runestone, they could potentially use it for anything, which would include as a weapon. Scorpia says they have the Black Garnet, but Shadow Weaver probably wouldn't like it if they used it. Catra's totally okay with that, so she tells Entrapta that she'll get her the Black Garnet. It turns out that Imp has been spying on them the whole time, and he goes and tells Hordak everything that they said.
Adora wants to skip to the part about her powers, so that way she can fix Glimmer, and Lighthope says that the reason why Glimmer is glitching is because her connection to her runestone has been disrupted. But with training, Adora can learn to harness She-Ra's powers and do many great things, including fix Glimmer. Adora asks how long this will take, and Lighthope says years. Adora starts panicking, insisting that all of this was her fault and she has to fix it in order to make up for her mistakes, because apparently it was her fault that Bow and Glimmer got captured and Entrapta died.
Adora, no. We've talked about this so many times, honestly.
It's really weird because she was the one who was mistreated, not the other way around. She's the one who told Frosta not to let terrorists into the prom, and Frosta ignored her and also attacked her for it, and Glimmer was the one who ignored Adora when she insisted on following Scorpia, and that's what led to her and Bow being captured. And then she's the one who has to come up with a plan and a rescue attempt to get her friends back, and I guess nobody told her that Entrapta's the one who chose to go back, and that's what ultimately led to her being separated from the others. But ultimately, none of this was Adora's fault. Adora's the only one that's trying. Yet Adora still blames herself for everything. Lighthope insists that her attachments to her friends are distracting her. She tells her about the previous She-Ra, a woman named Mara, the same one Madame Raz was talking about back in episode 3. She says that Mara wasn't able to let go of her attachments and ended up snapping, resulting in the planet being plunged into another dimension, an empty dimension, which explains why there are no stars anymore.
She kind of just glossed over that.
It'd be interesting to find out how she did that exactly. It would have been nice if we had gotten world building this season instead of just shoving all of this into the episode before the finale of the season. Lighthope continues to insist that Adora stay with her, which Adora agrees to as long as she can fix Glimmer first.
Lighthope starts showing Adora all of her memories that she's guilty about, and she tells her that she is a danger to her friends.
As a way to manipulate and ultimately force Adora into staying with her. That's pretty concerning. Honestly, Lighthope isn't making sense here. She's been going on and on about the importance of balance between the princesses and the planet, and Glimmer is a part of that delicate balance. She said that she's cut off from her runestone, and that Adora's main purpose is to protect the planet, so fixing Glimmer should be an immediate concern for her. But instead, she's completely dismissive of the situation, insisting that Adora should forget her friends and just do what she says is most important, which is training. And while I would agree with that, Glimmer should still be a priority. But back in the Fright Zone, Entrapta and Scorpia are working to hook up Entrapta's tech to the Black Garnet. Catra barks orders at them instead of helping. She says these machines won't hook up themselves, but they're already working on it. What do you want, Catra?
Shadow Weaver storms in and she's obviously not happy. She tells Catra that she never thought she would openly rebel, but she'll have no problem putting her back in her place.
Before Shadow Weaver is able to do anything, Hordak reveals himself and the fact that he's supporting Catra in her efforts to utilize the Black Garnet and First One's tech.
Shadow Weaver argues, saying that she's the only one who's been able to unlock the runestone's power, and Hordak says she's only used it for parlor tricks, but I would give her more credit than that. She took out all of Mystic Horse sorcerers,
along with Glimmer and Bow.
She's disgusted that he would let a princess tinker with the runestone, but he says that the princess's tinkering has boosted their firepower tenfold, so they know she's a princess and they just don't have a problem with it. Okay.
Shadow Weaver lashes out and attacks the small group, freezing Entrapta and Scorpia with her magic. She tries to do the same to Catra, but she manages to evade her, saying that all the years of abuse she's suffered has led to her being able to predict Shadow Weaver's moves, and she's able to destroy the gemstone on her mask, which is what connects her to the runestone, cutting off her power. And Catra tells Scorpia to take her away. It's really disappointing to see Shadow Weaver reduced to such a state. She was honestly one of the best characters in the original, but here it just feels like they did her so dirty. I understand this is a big moment for Catra. After all, this was her main goal in the show, to take Shadow Weaver's place. It's just disappointing that they took such an interesting character from the original and remove all of those aspects of her just so they can use her for Catra's development. It's a similar situation with Hordak.
He's there every time Catra needs him, usually to yell at Shadow Weaver, but most of his screen time is him having Catra's back. We don't really get to see much of him just being an evil leader.
In fact, we don't really get much leadership from him at all. But they drag her away, and Catra tells Entrapta to go ahead with her experiments.
We cut to Glimmer, Bow, and Swiftwind.
It turns out that the reason why Swiftwind hasn't been a part of the cast until now is because he's been going around Etheria freeing horses from their barns, under the logic that if he's free, other horses should be free too. Although that can be kind of dangerous. On the one hand, because horses are grazing animals, they tend to do better in the wild than other animals, like dogs or cats, which should never be abandoned. But on the other hand, it can still be putting the animals in danger. Plus, it could harm the environment.
A lot of the time when this happens in media, it's meant to be a metaphor for human freedom and equality, but I've never cared for that metaphor. Humans and animals all have different needs. Thankfully, these are horses, so they're probably still okay. If these were cats or dogs we were talking about, that would be absolutely a terrible terrible thing. They cannot survive out there in the wild. I still hope someone went and found all those horses. I'm not sure if this is meant to be a joke or not. Swiftwind takes it very seriously. He even brings it up with the queen, but everyone else ignores him. I still think that it would have been better to just have him be a part of the cast. He could have really contributed a lot of times throughout the season. He could have helped them to explore Etheria in the earlier episodes, although his personality is a little grating.
They get interrupted by a bunch of animals fleeing. Swiftwind says that he senses danger, and they should run too, but decides to go for Adora first and then run. It turns out that back in the Fright Zone, Entrapta's tinkering with the black garnet has thrown everything out of balance. This causes it to snow in the Whispering Woods, something that's never happened before. Shocked by this, Bo asks if Swiftwind can sense Adora so they can hurry up. Swiftwind points them into the direction of the Crystal Castle, which is shooting up a beam of light. I'm surprised I didn't notice that before.
The three make it to the castle, but the door is closed. Glimmer complains that her powers aren't working, so she can't just teleport them in, but Swiftwind is able to open it. They find Adora, but she's unconscious on some crystal bed. Swiftwind thinks he might be able to reach her, but they end up getting attacked by those robotic bugs.
Bo fends off the robots while Swiftwind is able to communicate with Adora. He seems to be using some kind of telepathic link, but doing so disrupts Light Hope's presence and forces her out of communication with Adora. She ends up having a similar reaction to Bo and Glimmer about his ability to talk. Swiftwind comments about he can understand why she's friends with Bo and Glimmer.
Swiftwind says that they need to get out of there, and Adora says she's not sure if she should go back. Light Hope says if she goes back, she'll only make things worse, and everyone will be better off if she just stays far away from them. Okay, Light Hope, Adora does need to train, but what is this? You could have been way more constructive. I don't even know if I trust you. Adora says she has to stay away from them for the greater good. I swear, anytime someone says the greater good, there's always bad behind it.
There's an ulterior motive.
How can this be for the greater good? Shut it!
Swiftwind says he's been able to form complex thoughts for like a week, and even he can tell it's a bad idea. Is he saying that this whole thing has happened over the course of a week, from episode 3 to this episode?
Because that seems extremely unlikely. Glimmer said that the Princess Alliance meetings are weekly, and we've seen 2 of them, once in episode 4 and once in episode 5. So that means that it's been at least a week between those 2 episodes.
And that was episode 5. A lot's happened since then.
Maybe he just can't tell time. He says she can't just sit around and mope.
Adora says she's not moping because she actually has hurt people. Never mind that there's no evidence of that. But Swiftwind tells her if that was true, why are Glimmer and Bo here trying to get her back? They see a projection of Glimmer and Bo with Adora's body, and Swiftwind standing over her trying to communicate with her. Is Swiftwind showing her this, or is it the Crystal Castle? He tells her they're doing this because they're friends, not because she's She-Ra. Adora decides she's not Mara, and she didn't do this to fulfill some destiny, but to help people. We don't really know Mara all that much, so I don't know if we can just assume her motivations. All we know is what Light Hope told us, and I'm not sure I trust her. But she decides that her friends and her attachments are a part of who she is, so she tells Swiftwind that they'll go. A portal opens and the 2 walk through it, so they both wake up. Glimmer's really happy to see her awake, but Bo starts calling for help because they're still being attacked by those spiders. So Adora transforms into She-Ra and takes care of them pretty quickly. They fly off on Swiftwind and realize that this isn't just affecting the Whispering Woods, it's happening all over the planet. So they head back to Bright Moon. Back in the Fright Zone, Catra and the others aren't even sure what the Black Garnet is doing, but Catra says she can work with it. They should probably try to figure out what it's actually doing, though.
They really should think these things through. When it comes to Entrapta's experiments, it seems like she's just throwing things together and waiting to see what happens without worrying about the consequences.
We've seen her experiments go really poorly.
She doesn't seem to take any kind of precautions before she acts.
And the Horde is just going along with her.
It's almost like they're enabling her. And there might be some gain for them, considering the fact that she has been able to boost their weapons so far, but they have no idea if her experiments will end up destroying the Fright Zone or not. It's just really really irresponsible. I understand that these are all villains, but it would be really appreciated if they were actually smart about their actions. Just because someone's a villain doesn't actually mean they have to be completely reckless.
I think this episode did an alright job of setting up the problems for the finale. We do see that the world is kind of going haywire because of Entrapta's experiments, but I also wish that this season had done a better job of handling the world building and exposition. A lot of this episode was exposition being dumped on the audience,
And it was a lot to get through.
we did learn a lot of things, but there was a lot of opportunity for them to include exposition and world building in small chunks throughout the season, but they didn't really take advantage of that. We did like this episode more than some of the others because we did finally get some world building.
We just felt it was clunky in the execution.
We finally got to see Swiftwind and Lighthope in this episode. I really feel like Swiftwind could have been here throughout the whole season. I don't think they had to bring him in so late. And then it turns out the only reason he wasn't there was because he was being irresponsible and freeing horses that were domesticated.
I also think it's interesting that he admitted that he's drawn to Adora and connected to her, yet he wasn't loyal enough to stay by her side throughout the season.
They really could have used him.
But ultimately, he's pretty obnoxious and grating. His voice actor sounds like he's having fun, but it's just not that fun to listen to him. It's the fault of the writing, though, not the actor. So if Swiftwind is connected to Adora, does that mean that lizard she transformed is also connected to her?
I don't know if we can trust Lighthope. Lighthope just said some really sketchy things.
I mean, it kind of calls into question She-Ra and the first ones in general, I guess, because it almost sounds like they're forcing their will onto Adora and Mara.
And then when Mara couldn't do what they wanted her to do, it's like they blamed her. But we don't know Mara, and we don't really know exactly what happened. We just know what Lighthope told us.
And there's always two sides to the story. A lot of this kind of feels like Avatar: The Last Airbender. I understand that the concept of balance is nothing new. It's just hard to not make that connection when it comes to this long line of previous She-Ras and how there's always a new chosen one.
All these elements needing to be in balance
in order for the world to work properly. A war throwing the world out of balance.
Kids trying to stop that war. Sometimes it feels like you might as well just watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. That show executed a lot of these concepts better than what we see here.
Here the writing just isn't very strong.
But that's just our opinion. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. We have one more episode of this season to review, so if you liked what you saw here, you can like this video and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next video. Bye!
Bye, everyone!